Take the flame inside you, twist it at the end, light it up and take a puff. And that's something else, isn't it? Let's not go there. So let's talk about The Wicker Man 1973, directed by Robin Hardy, written by Anthony Shaffer, based upon a novel by David Pinner, who doesn't get a credit in this film. Very naughty. It stars Edward Woodward, Christopher Lee, Britt Ekland, and Diane Cilento. Now, I'm going to keep calling cilantro. But why am I talking about this film now, in December, when it's clearly about harvest festivals and the like? Well, the simple fact is, I'm recording this on the 6th of December, 2023, which is exactly 50 years after its original release. The theatrical cut is not what I've based my video on. I've based it on, I think, the director's cut, or it's a version that has the church scenes at the beginning and certain scenes are in the right place chronologically, let's say. But I love this film growing up. I saw it in my teens and it's definitely stayed with me. There's a lot of stuff that I've realised of how I look at the world, my interest in sort of neopaganism, and I think it probably helped forward neopaganism in general. But let's go through and explain exactly why I love The Wicker Man. And yes, for those curious, I will be talking about the Nicolas Cage remake next week. And the week after, The Wicker Tree, which I didn't even know existed. Apparently it's terrible, but we'll see. And the week after, I'll talk about this new chair that I'm on right now. But that's in the future. So like I say, I watched the version that starts with the Catholic ritual, you know, and before Howie goes out to the island. And I love the juxtaposition there. It starts with a ritual. Howie's worldview is Catholicism. We know that because taking communion is a Catholic act. But then he downplays, he mocks outright the traditions on Summerisle, which are based, again, like in that paganistic root. But they're both rituals. It's just that one is what he's grown up with. I could go into the psychological underpinnings of, in-groups and out-groups, because that's something we've been learning recently, but I'm not going to go into it too heavily. But there is a lot of that, just because that's what he knows, that's what's familiar for him, that's what he's grown up with, and what he's absorbed as part of his identity. Anything that isn't that is obviously lesser. And it's something that we all do. I love Paul Giovanni and Magnet. Magnet were created entirely for this film. And if you're curious and love the music, it is on Spotify. I've checked. But I realised that this, like I said, there's a lot of things in here that have informed who I am and what I enjoy. And I know that this created a love of this neo-folk, sort of postmodern folk kind of stuff that was very much prevalent in this time. If you remember, for my 37th year of life, as it were, I did a few songs, and I started it with a cover. No, I think the first cover I did, should I say, was a country version of Walk Me Home by Pink. And I used this. If it shows up. The problems of a green screen. But I use this in that. And I've always wanted a dual harp. I refuse to use the other term because I think that's very pejorative. So, I've wanted a dual harp for a while. And I know exactly why. There is the song in this, the Maypole song, that starts with it. That little boingy sound just tickles something in my brain. So many years later, I got to buy one and I got to use one. I mean, they're not expensive. I could have bought one at any point. But that, I think, is solely because of this film. Could I even say that, some of my pedantry comes from how this whole thing about a churchyard that Diane Cilento says in the film, as Miss Rose.
The building attached to the ground in which the body lies is no longer used for Christian worship. So whether it is still a churchyard is debatable.
That sort of semantic preciseness probably informed a lot of who I am. And like I say, I loved so much of this film. I will go more in detail, but I loved how Christopher Lee, many years after, on regular occasions would say this is one of his greatest ever roles. We're used to seeing him in roles like Dracula and antagonistic roles like that. Saruman even, at the other end of his career pretty much. So we're used to seeing him in these antagonistic roles, but they're very over the top in some cases. They're very big characters. Lord Summerisle is a big character, yes, but he's also a man of science. He's rational, and it's just a very different role. There's a lot of nuance in the character that perhaps was quite refreshing for Lee, and I can't imagine anyone else in the role. But I'll come back to more about Christopher Lee's performance later. But like I said before, I think this conflict of this neo-paganism and Christianity is done so well. And I grew up, I went to a Roman Catholic primary school, not because of religious beliefs of my family. It was just a good school in the area. I know I've said this in videos before, but just so people don't have to go back through my history. And then I went to a Church of England school, and then into a non-denominational. But I think this helped separate that Christianity that I'd had instilled in me through those school environments to learn that there are other options out there. And just because that's what you've always had and what you've always known doesn't mean it's inherently better. There are some elements of Howie that I agree with, of course. You know, whilst I'm saying that I fell out with Christianity over the years. And this isn't a, you know, I don't want anyone to preach in the comments saying, oh, if you just come back, blah, blah, blah. Trust me, I've heard all the arguments and none of them are convincing right now. But I do agree with Howie on one thing when he's talking about produce, and it's very prevalent today, like where we've got so much food readily available, but 90% of it's processed and modified. Like, the idea of real produce is quite nice. I do have to agree with him on that. But I always forget that this received an X rating, which was kind of the highest thing at the time. And I get to the scene where Howie's doing this little night walk and seeing the couples, you know, in the act, should we say, outside, and it holds onto a picture of a woman, you know, bare-breasted riding a man. And I'm like, oh, that's the X rating, is it? Okay. But as we go through the film, you know, there's this perspective that we're given. You know, this is we come in from Howie's perspective. Christianity is the right and true way. But over time, we get more and more hints of maybe that's not the be-all, end-all. There's a speech, you know, around the early part of the film with Lord Summerall outside as he sent Ash Buchanan in for his manhood ceremony, shall we say. And he talks about how, you know, animals don't have to worry about all this kind of stuff, and we bring meaning and other things in life. We complicate life by putting these things, and it's obviously a very valid observation about organised religion. He's seeing the conflict in Howie as he can't deal with the fact that, you know, a boy's becoming a man next door to him. And in the original cut, this is, I think, where Willow's song plays, but it makes sense later as a last temptation. So maybe that sells this speech a little better, but I still think the flow works the other way around. And we kind of see, maybe not all 7, granted, but I think we do see a test throughout the various deadly sins. I think the most obvious ones are lust and wrath, because he's very angry. He's almost evangelical in his belief. It's like, I'm trying to bring you to the true path. I'm trying to save your souls. And all you're doing is throwing it back in my face and going over the top with all this nature worship, and I don't agree with it. And obviously the lust thing through the temptations of Willow, etc. And yeah, I love this fact that it is putting these two things together. It's juxtaposing the belief systems. It's like, it's okay to feel this in this moment, but, you know, your vehement opposition to this is in itself sinful in some ways. I've actually heard this film described in some places as a musical, and the first few times I was like, I don't get it, but actually, when you listen to it, the fact that the songs are so prevalent throughout and they form an important part of it, this is a musical. There is no way getting around it. The fact that we have incidental music that links to later songs as well. Gently Johnny comes in quite a few times, and Summer Is a Coming In comes in a lot of times as well. So yeah, this is, strangely enough, a neo-pagan horror musical, and I love that. Again, was that something that tickled my brain of my love of musicals? When Howie's finally trying to get permission to exhume Rowan Morrison, or what he believes is Rowan Morrison anyway, there is a great conversation that he has with Lord Summerall where the science is brought out. He's backing up the pagan belief, you know, saying like his ancestors realised that the soil composition, all that kind of thing was really important, but the common person at the time would not have understood that. So it's like, oh, if we appease the gods, they will give us bountiful harvests. And he talks about things, you know, like Howie being a religious man, and challenges it because, you know, it's like, well, yeah, you're a religious man, but so am I. Just because my religion isn't your religion doesn't mean I'm less religious. There are many different flavours of religion out there. And he talks about parthenogenesis, I think the word was used. The idea of a divine birth, you know, creating something from nothing. Howie, you know, immediately disagrees with this. But then it's a case of, oh, so, you know, immaculate conception. A woman could be impregnated by the Spirit of God to create the Son of God, which is also God, who will then die and become another version of God. That's fine. But just because I don't put it in those terms, I'm wrong. And it's again that wonderful, constant pushing of his beliefs. This is a crucial part of the process. They need a pure soul in every meaning of that. So by pushing him and pushing him and pushing him, if he relents, he's obviously not the pure soul that they need. But they've done their research. They know that this man, a man of the law, he has chosen a defender role in society. This is also key. He has to be a hero of sorts. But yeah, they constantly push. And I think a stroke of genius, there's a lot in their plan, but one of the great strokes of genius I really love is piquing his interest in the May Day celebration by insisting that he won't like it, so it's best if he stays away. All of the seeds being sown of, well, you know, you should get away from it. It's making it a very active choice. Again, a crucial part of it. He had to choose the actions. But all of these temptations, all of these pushes, all of these challenges to his belief system, not only religiously, but in who he is, I would argue. It's great how, if he'd have relented at any point, he may have been saved. They'd have had to find someone else, because he obviously isn't pure enough. Maybe it would have been a child. Maybe that is the deal. Maybe Rowan would have been sacrificed. We won't know. But there is a line where Willow's just like, you're not actually married, you're just engaged, so why can't you have a bit of fun? And he actually says, I don't believe in it before marriage. He's never asked, are you a virgin? He's never asked that. But they know that he's engaged, they know his belief system, and he volunteers that information. And again, the plan is amazingly well constructed. Yes, it could fall apart if one tiny thing changes. If he gave in at any of those points, the whole plan's gone out the window. So I really hope there was a contingency, but I hope that wasn't some child being sacrificed instead. But this whole plan, they've been planning it since the last harvest and making sure they do the research, getting it all there to lead Howie to his end, really. But as he's, you know, sort of getting to this end point, you know, he's trying to find Rowan. He knows that he's being lied to. He doesn't exactly know how, and he doesn't know where Rowan Morrison is. But he's still searching. And the whole reason I watched this film is a moment when, like I say, he's hunting around, he goes into a house, opens, or he's looking through a wardrobe, the door opens, and a kid falls. Has like a trail of blood, as it looks like, on her mouth, and she just lies there, dead-eyed, and then the eyes flick, and she laughs and runs off. That creeped me out the first few times, even though this is what I was told about the film. This was my introduction. I was told there is a film, it's a really weird thing with the Equalizer, because that's what I knew him as at that point in time. So the Equalizer is a Scotsman, goes onto an island, weird pagan stuff, and girl falls out of wardrobe. Like, that scene was described to me. That was the selling point. I'm like, I need to watch this. So just from that one scene, which, like I say, creeped me out for a long time. Like, even though I knew it was coming, it still, it got me. The last watch, unfortunately, didn't have that impact because I was more looking forward to seeing it. But it still reminded me that's why I was brought onto this ride. So once he's got rid of McGregor and taken over the role of Punch, and it's clear that everyone knows, there's one thing I saw this time that I'd never noticed before, where they're doing the chop bit, and he's going to go next, and of course the idea is it's going to be him, but it's not. He thinks, oh, I've gotten away with it. But I noticed before his turn, when he was being put in place, she grabbed Holly to go into the next role after him, who would be the one who would be chopped. And, it makes him think he's gone away with it. I just have to follow him up here. And then we get the final test. And I think that's what this is. This is the final test. It's like, okay, you've passed all the others. You haven't been tempted. You haven't allowed us to convince you to do anything against the character that we believed you had. Here, is Rowan Morrison finally revealed. Will you step up? Will you reveal yourself as her rescuer? As part of the counselling course, we've been talking about the drama triangle, and there are 3 pillars to that. You have the bully or persecutor, you have the victim, who hopefully becomes a survivor, and hopefully the bully becomes a challenger. Like, they've all got their opposites, like the negative and positive, or the less ideal and more ideal ways of doing the same thing. But the other angle is rescuer, which should then become more of a coach. But yeah, they're hoping to prompt this rescuer behaviour, and fortunately for Rowan, like I say, it may have turned out that she would still have been sacrificed, but he passed the test, and he had to go of his own volition. It could be argued they deceived him, so was it truly an informed agreement? Did he truly consent? But in certain situations, deception's really useful. Again, going back into what we're learning in psychology, a lot of psychological experiments require deception, because if you tell people what you're expecting out of them, it's going to skew the truth. So I think in this case, whilst I'm not excusing the actions, of course, I'm not likening it directly to a scientific experiment, which has really good, long-reaching repercussions. But I think for the outcome they wanted, deception was key. If he knew that it was all leading along, he wouldn't have gone along with it. He'd have just brought the whole letter, or the full power of the law behind him. But instead, no. He did it on his own and stood up and went, yeah, I need to rescue this woman. Obviously, the next bit, not technically of his own volition, but he really has no choice now. He's too far in. He's outnumbered, outgunned, as it were. But it's interesting, again, he even at this end, he's decrying the faith, he's challenging it, and he then leans on, and I love this, and I love this for so many reasons, and again, Christopher Lee does so well here. He's shouting back that whole scientific argument that he was told earlier on by Lord Summerall. The fact that it's about the soil and making sure the right cultivars are bred, etc. And maybe the soil's just re-shifted to its natural state, so it needs to be adjusted. But no, that's not happening. People now just think it's a religious thing. This pagan cult is what's making the crops grow. And he throws back. Next year, after these crops have failed, they're going to need a bigger target, and that's going to be you, Lord Summerall. And there is a flash on Christopher Lee's face. And again, that might be why he thinks this is a good performance, or one of his greatest roles, because he does so well with his role in it. And then we have the clash of, Summers are coming in, and the Lord is my shepherd, and it's just this. It's still very hard to watch, because whilst I think, I have an issue, shall we say, with overbearing religious types who are like, my way is the only way, and refuse to accept that other belief systems exist, even if they're similar. The Abrahamic religions all argue, but at their core there's a lot of similarities, and a lot of religious issues would be solved if people could see these. But whilst I may not like Howie as a person because of that, he's still an innocent in very many definitions of that word. But he is an innocent here. He's not said, oh, your crops are failing, I will volunteer and be burned alive. I have come here under deception to save a girl. So it's still very hard to watch. He's praying and he's trying his best to have his faith as his shield. And even his last words are, oh God, Jesus, save me. It's all this kind of thing. He's still reaching out from his religious core. Something that makes him feel safe. And yeah, it's really hard going, like I say, to watch. But when I was watching it this time, now that Midsummer's existed, I kind of think that this walked so that Midsummer could run. I do think that without this, it still might have existed, but I definitely get Wicker Man vibes from it. In a lot of the setup, a lot of how it's framed, a lot of the core ideas, is the clash of the cultures. It's this Americanized culture, we do things a certain way, but this very social, communal society that the Horga were and are in the film. And, the sacrifice of the people, again, who aren't part of this world and have been brought into it. There's a lot of comparisons. I wouldn't be surprised if Ari Aster is a fan of The Wicker Man. And I think a lot of people should be. Like I say, if you watch the version I did, where you have that intro just to get a bit more understanding of how he is, and you get everything in a decent chronological order that works. I really enjoy this film. I know there are a lot of issues. I'm not even getting into the butt double. If you've seen all the stuff, you know what I'm on about. If not, look it up yourself. It's fine. But I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into the issues people had and some of the struggles on set. I just want to say that this film means a lot to me. The fact that it's 50 years ago that it came out, 10 years before I was born, I think is a testament. You know, it's stood the test of time. There are films that come out and we can forget them, but this is one that I think everyone who's seen it remembers it. And then the early 2000s came around, and Nicolas Cage decided that, yeah, well, not necessarily Nicolas Cage perhaps, but people decided they wanted to do a remake because that was the thing. And I'll talk about that next time. So thank you very much for letting me talk. It's probably like 20 minutes or so now about The Wicker Man. That's how much I love it. I've tried to be as quick as possible and make sure I hit the right points though. So yeah, until next week, as always, thank you for watching and take care.
Let me not undergo the real pains of hell, dear God, because I die unshriven. And establish me in that bliss which knows no ending. Through Christ, our Lord.